afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast. Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane. We are off here to have a look at the Obersoldaten. Yes, indeed, the mächtige Obersoldaten, besides, the slightly awkward name. They are a pretty nifty infantry unit. Also, at 400 manpower, they are also pretty much the most expensive non-doctrinal unit in the game. Very expensive. That is pretty much 100 manpower per each member in that unit. So you are definitely paying quite the steep price. On the other hand, you do get the most bang out of your buck with this unit. It starts out partially here, 3 riflemen and then 1 machine gunner with an MG34, and due to the experience of the crew, they're able to wield that very effectively, overall leading to a unit that is very effective at range. It also happens to be a very accurate representation of how Panzer Grenadiers were actually equipped, not fully with assault rifles, but a mix of rifles and machine guns at a higher quantity. So in that regard, already you do have a very firepower heavy unit, one that can dominate at long range engagements, although with heavy cover, of course, it might have a bit of problems there. And certainly any units charging at an Obersoldaten unit is going to need some kind of edge, either smoke to sort of obfuscate things to get close or something else, otherwise the Obersoldaten will tear through them like a hot knife through butter, or basically an MG34 or 42 through butter. Also note, in conjunction with special operations, they do get access to assault rifles as an upgrade. No note, if you do go for it, you will switch away the MG34 and thus give away this sort of longer range advantage. Though with short to medium range, they will become more powerful. So that is very important to note. Also note, they also have one of the very few units with a light machine gun which can actually fire it on the move. Although note, it's not going to be very effective, but still it will allow them to do a bit more sort of damage as they move, and also means they'll be less likely to just keep jumping around with the MG34, overall ensuring it will keep a high rate of fire. Force in the building, for example, is going to be a very powerful unit as well, since it can dominate a large amount of terrain. And also note again, they do a lot of damage. They can very quickly take down infantry, and generally if you are facing Obersoldaten, you don't want any of your units out in the open facing them, otherwise they will do horrible things to you. So that is very important to keep in mind while fighting the Obersoldaten. They are very overpowering infantry in certain regards. Though again, it can of course be negated from numbers, good tactics, and not just running straight at them, because if you do that, you will end in tears. Or well, more specifically, your men will end in bloody tears. They will also have tears, but those will be the tears of laughter. So keep that in mind. In terms of ability, they have access to bundle grenades. Very powerful, as you might know. They also have access to the Blenker for frangible smoke grenade. Currently, though, I would not recommend. I mean, it's essentially a smoke grenade, but it's a very expensive smoke grenade. It's one that costs more than a bundle grenade. You might ask yourself, well, what does it do? Does it disable vehicles, or for example, cause the crew to abandon it, like the actual Blenker could? Sadly, no. If so, that thing would have been worth bloody 50 munitions. Instead, it's basically a smoke grenade that slows down infantry and damages infantry in the smoke cloud, which I wouldn't call quite 50 munitions worthy as of this recording, since it's also pretty much limits your maneuvers. And again, 50 munitions for the Oberkommando West is quite the hefty price, so it's not that recommendable. But still, can be used in a pinch, for example, cover retreat. But again, I mean, that's about it. Really, it shouldn't cost 50 munitions for that. So let's just keep it. There we go. Assault rifles up on these chaps, increasing their short to medium range power, making them more lethal. They also finally have the ability to booby trap points for 50 munitions. It's not quite as powerful as the urban defense for the Soviet booby traps, but still it can cause a bit of harm, and it's only a bit more effective in some regards than the mine, since it doesn't depend on your opponent's treading on a specific point, just needs to get within the circle. So it can be quite handy to use. Quite handy indeed. So that's a little note. Then of course, they can also get infiltrating grenade assaults thanks to this commander. And of course up close, I mean, particularly versus low health units, they will eat them up quite handily. So there's one thing to note, at least currently, I don't know if this might be changed ultimately though, but they actually get a bonus versus retreating units, so you actually have to be very careful around the Obersoldaten. But here comes actually one of the major weaknesses of the Obersoldaten. They have absolutely no anti-tank capability. No Panzerfaust, no anti-tank rifle rates, Panzerschrecks, no nothing. They are completely defenseless versus armor, versus vehicles in fact. vehicles. That is one major weakness there for the 400 manpower unit. Also, another thing to keep in mind, they are a force-man unit as well, which also makes them vulnerable to explosions. And also, so instead focus fire, I mean, you can very quickly lose a large quantity of squad effectiveness in that unit if you're not careful. So that's something very important to keep in mind with the Obersoldaten. They can very quickly sort of get gunned down, also move out in the open. So they do have their limitations. They do have very serious limitations. And that's also something vital to keep in mind while utilising the Obersoldaten, or you will end up in a lot of trouble. Which I'm sure you don't want to happen. So it's very important to keep in mind while utilising your Obersoldaten. Again, you know, don't charge them blindly across your opponent, particularly with their light machine guns. Your Obersoldaten will go down very quickly. In that regard, they're not full assault units again. I mean, if the Blendkerfer was a bit more effective and cheaper, I mean, it would be worth sort of cups up. But again, you can actually use it to assault because you will get slowed down and you will hurt with it. So that's a bit of a problem. So it can disable vehicle weapons, but you know. Oh wait, still something very vital to keep in mind about the Obersoldaten. Again, very powerful infantry otherwise, very powerful infantry. And again, nothing to be taken lightly, but again, expensive, in some regards weak, and can be, you know, cleared out if you're not careful very quickly, and again, vulnerable to vehicles. They do also have some very interesting veterancy bonus. I mean, first it's the smoke grenade, but also as they sort of slowly get better, they get more accurate, get a bit tougher. The veterancy 3, they can actually heal themselves, which is quite good. But at veterancy 4, for example, they can actually suppress units. I mean, you know, units in lighter cover and such will probably not be sort of suppressed, but some units out in the open will be suppressed. And that, by the way, is not dependent on them having a light machine gun. They can also do it with the assault rifles, though they might have to get a bit closer for them to be able to do that. And for example, here again, charging versus Obersoldaten with shock troopers is maybe not the wisest of ideas in this case. We're able to get a bit of challenge in there, but still, mindful of that. Veterancy 5 pretty much allows them to sprint all the way. So, for example, I mean, that can also be quite handy and certainly also benefit, you know, the ones with the assault rifle. But overall, a very solid unit, a very good unit, in fact, and certainly one I personally end up using a lot more compared to, say, the Volkswagen, which I really would not still call comparatively useful. But certainly, I mean, they are a good unit, and if you're not relying, say, on Fallschirmjägers or Panzerfusiliers at the moment, I mean, get Obersoldaten. They'll definitely not let you down if you handle them correctly. Though, again, remember, they are Obersoldaten, not Übersoldaten. If you try to use them like that, you'll end up with a lot of dead Obersoldaten. I mean, again, I have faced a lot of players who I see to sort of rush them out in the open, and they can very quickly get gunned down. So again, they're not bulletproof. What they are good at is actually shooting off a lot of bullets. So that's rather the thing you have to keep on. Again, be mindful of vehicles. Have always some kind of armor support near them, or anti-tank support, so you don't get overwhelmed by vehicles. Of course, that is really one of the major weaknesses, and that also includes artillery and mines. Again, the small squad numbers are actually a definite weakness. And there's also something you have to be wary of. I mean, you can very quickly be forced to pull them back as well, since they can't suffer so much before they become reasonably combat ineffective. Although the light machine gun to a certain extent, you know, mitigates that. I mean, you can't count it for too long, because again, then you risk actually handing an MG34 to the opponent, and you don't want to do that. Anything but giving your opponent an MG34. That LMG there. Anything. But overall, I hope that sort of clarifies people on the might here of the Obersoldaten, their effectiveness, their combat worth, but also their weaknesses, how to, you know, fight them as an opponent if facing them, but also how to get the most out of them as a player. And again, also keep in mind, again, you know, some of their abilities here. I mean, a good use of group attacks, for example, can also frustrate your opponent. So hopefully with that, people will be enlightened with greater understanding and maybe a greater joy in using them, and inflicting harm upon their opponents, or inflicting harm upon them, who knows. But hopefully you've learned something from it, hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. If you did want to subscribe, tell your friends, share it with everybody. If not, you know, well, I'm sorry, but of course feel free to, you know, post what you might like to see in the next Propagandacast Lehr in the comments. I'll try to fulfill it, though no guarantees, but this is Imperial Dane saying cheers and see you all tomorrow.